All right, guys, welcome to episode 3 of the Midwestern Archaeology podcast. My name is Lee.
My name's Amanda. Hi, hello. How are you?
We're
Welcome back.
so excited to be here today. We've got a really interesting topic to talk to you about.
This is one we both had a lot of fun researching.
Yes, it's very different than our last episode, History of Archaeology.
Yes.
This is going to be the first episode in a 4-part series on the different periods of pre-contact Native American history. The first, of course, being the Paleo period. So yeah, we're really excited about it.
Yeah.
The Paleo period is really the beginning of the story of humanity in North America, and it starts as soon as humans leave eastern Siberia and enter the Western Hemisphere, which happened around 12 to 14,000 years ago, possibly earlier than that. We're not going to get too much into the specifics about when humans first arrived because it is the topic of a lot of research, and in a couple years, it could change.
Right.
The timeline could change. But whenever they did, these people were truly entering a world that was entirely new to any humans. Basically, at no point in the history of the Earth had there been a greater ape or hominid that had crossed over to the Americas.
Yeah.
For the first time ever, humans entered the vast land of the Americas.
Yeah, so let's talk about what the Pleistocene era world would have looked like.
So before we do that, what is the Pleistocene?
So the Pleistocene is the Ice Age.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. So the Earth of the late Pleistocene, so towards the end of the Ice Age, was a much different place than it is today. So North America was covered in vast grasslands, forests, and then also glacial ice sheets. So these ice sheets originated from the North Pole and stretched down across Canada, eventually reaching in furthest southern point in the Ohio River Valley. So that's southern Indiana and southern Ohio comprised the terminus of the enormous ice sheet known as the Laurentide Glacier. So the glaciers formed during a time in the Pleistocene known as the last glacial maximum. So the last time the glaciers were this big.
At their maximum extent.
Yes. Yes.
It's pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah. Which was between 26,000 and then 20,000 years ago, which, as the name suggests, was when the glaciers were the furthest south.
Yep, absolutely. And because the Earth was so cold and there were so many glaciers worldwide, not just in North America, much of the planet's water became trapped in these huge glaciers. Like I said, in North America and also in Northern Europe. So if you look at a map, which we will include of the Pleistocene era Earth, you can notice that there are some huge sprawling glaciers. And this led to much lower sea levels globally, which exposed a lot of low-lying continental shelf and just resulted in much more land being above the sea. So most notable amongst this exposed land was a stretch of territory between far eastern Siberia and the modern-day state of Alaska. This is the famous land bridge that humans would eventually use to settle and migrate from eastern Siberia to the Americas. So this land is called Beringia, which is after the Bering Land Bridge or the Bering Straits. So some people call it the Bering Land Bridge, but for the purposes of this episode, we're going to refer to it as Beringia. It's just
we like the word.
It's cool. Yeah, it's cool. So Beringia first emerged out of the northern Pacific Oceans around 70,000 years ago. However, from approximately 24 to 13,000 years ago, this was really the time period that these glaciers that were covering so much of the Earth began to melt, and it allowed humans and other migratory animals to enter Beringia and then eventually Americas. So yeah,
kind of tying back to what you said earlier, the reason why people hadn't been here yet, huge ice sheet in the way.
Oh yeah,
they just couldn't access the land.
So there was either an ocean or there was a huge glacier in the way.
Yeah.
But there was a small window of time that there wasn't any glaciers. There also wasn't any sea. So it was land that was exposed.
So what land wasn't covered under the glaciers? It was verdant, it was green, it was lush, it was ideal. If you eat grass, it was ideal.
If you're a grazing mammal, like some of the ones that we're about to talk about, this was ideal land. And honestly, it was probably cultivated by these grazing animals because the thing is that they just move slowly and they're just and so there wasn't any opportunity for trees or forests to grow. So it was just vast grasslands that was well suited for these animals. So tell us a little bit about these animals.
So you got like the most famous example, in my opinion, which is the mastodon. But then there were so many different species of bison specifically. We've only got the one now, but A lot of bison back
My
then.
favorite one is one just simply called the giant bison, which if you guys should Google it. We'll include pictures, like illustrations of all of these animals that we're about to tell you about in the blog post. But the giant bison was huge. It was basically like a small bus.
Honestly?
Of a bison.
Period.
So cool.
I love that.
I do too.
That's what I want in a bison. Small bus of a bison.
We miss you, giant bison.
Some other examples are the camelops. That's right. We had a camel.
Camels evolved in North America originally. So
and horses.
Yep.
We also had saber-tooths. I love me a good saber-tooth. Diego from Ice Age.
Shout out.
We also had giant beavers. Lee is a really big fan of beavers, if anybody's curious. Do love a good beaver. We also had the dire wolf and then giant ground sloths.
So it was these species that the early Paleo-Americans hunted, and they comprised the majority of their diet, specifically the mastodon and the woolly mammoth. So a lot of archaeological evidence suggests that they specifically like to target these really huge mammals because it was a lot of food. There was a lot of resources that they could get from the carcasses, the tusks, the ivory, the bones, the wool, all of that stuff. So with that being said, we are going to take a little break. And when we return, we are going to see how the humans actually came from Beringia down south into the Americas. And then when they arrive, we're going to see what they were up to and what was going on down there during the Paleo period. So talk to you in a minute.
We'll be right back.
Put on your best and dig deep for a good cause. ARI's annual gala is your chance to support archaeological education, research, and preservation while enjoying an unforgettable evening of history, stories, and celebrations. Auctions, cocktails, surprises, and a chance to leave your mark on the future of the past. Grab your tickets at exploreari.org.
Well, welcome back, guys. How was your break? Ours was good.
Hopefully good.
Yeah, a little short.
Not too long.
We had a sip of some water.
I did. You didn't.
I did not. That was
live. You're not drinking anything right now.
I have a sucker. Still in the wrapper because I don't want to hurt your ears with that sound. But
we're not an ASMR podcast.
We are not. Shout out to those who are.
Yeah.
So in the first part, we talked about what the world was looking like at this time. Now we're gonna shift our focus to the people. So
yeah, exactly.
We're gonna talk about who the first groups of humans were in this area. And to kind of lead into that, humans had lived in Beringia for a long time, coming over from eastern Siberia approximately 23,000 to 30,000 years ago.
And it's possible that they came in earlier than that, but we do know that there was a time where Beringia was accessible for these eastern Siberians, but they couldn't have gone any further to the Americas, mainly because of the glaciers. Yeah. They also didn't have any reason to. Right. So Beringia for these proto-Paleo-Americans, this was their homeland. This is where they lived and died and did everything, hunted. But with that being said, it can definitively be said that humans left Beringia and reached the Americas at least 14 to 12,000 years ago. And they did this through a variety of methods. And there's two commonly accepted ways that they are thought to have used. So the first is a coastal route and then a land route. So when people hear Bering Land Bridge, they often assume that people moved further south only via a land route. So, you hear land bridge, you think
land.
I'm walking on the land.
Which makes sense.
Yes, it does.
That's very intuitive.
But for the first humans that initially settled south of Beringia, they are actually thought to have taken a coastal route, at least for the very first ones. And the reason for that is that when the glaciers melted, the land that became exposed was bare and lacked any vegetation. This meant that this area was basically a desert devoid of food or game, which would be the ways that humans would be able to make this journey. Right. They can only take so much food with them. It was only until that land became more hospitable that it was viable to take this land route. Until that was viable, the coastal route was the only available option for southward migrations. So it was a combination of the two, basically.
Basically, yeah. Right. So I want to highlight that research into this topic is still ongoing and many different theories are being explored. This is why we are giving ranges of time and not making a definitive statement. The most commonly accepted date range in archaeology is 12,000 to 14,000 years ago. Now we're going to talk about the Clovis people.
We are going to talk about the Clovis people, which, if there's anything that people know about the early humans in North America, they probably have heard of the Clovis.
Clovis is iconic.
Yes.
For a reason.
They are.
So, for decades, researchers and archaeologists assumed the first peoples to arrive in the Americas was the Clovis culture, the Clovis people. Their tools, including the iconic Clovis Point, are found all across North America as far west as modern-day Pennsylvania. These sites of tool caches have been the oldest known evidence of human activity for some time in North America.
They had been. So in
Yes.
past tense, the reason we're talking about the fact that traditionally thought to be the earliest humans in North America, there were these people known as the Clovis. We don't know to what extent they were an actual unified people group. Honestly, they probably weren't at all. The thing that really unites them is their use of common tools across different sites. So we don't know, or yeah, we can't say for certain if they had like similar.
It's archaeologists
language.
that are grouping them together.
Exactly.
It's not the people from that time.
Yes.
So
yeah.
There is a local Clovis site in our neck of the woods, which is called the Paleo Crossing site, and that's in Ohio. We will go into more detail about that later. We just wanted to tease it a little bit right now.
Yeah, and again, they had some of the same material culture, but that's all that we can say definitively about them.
Yes.
Is that they made tools similarly.
Mm-hmm.
So archaeological discoveries at sites like Monteverde in Chile and Meadowcroft Rock Shelter in Pennsylvania challenged this Clovis first theory that had been just this long accepted belief that these people were the first people to come to America. We now know that there was very probably a pre-Clovis group of people that made the first journeys into the Americas from Beringia. As we were just talking about, they probably used a coastal route, because when they did, these land routes that they would have used if they used a land route were not accessible because they were basically, there was desert-like conditions there. Right. So with that being said, unfortunately, there's not a whole lot we can say about these pre-Clovis people, because it's a pretty recent discovery that these people were around. There's not much that we can say about them. All that we know is that they were there and that they were probably before Clovis. But the more research that gets done, the more we can say with more certainty.
Yes. Whether or not these small bands of people were a part of the Clovis culture or the earlier group, one thing we can tell is that once humans dispersed across North America, they became very isolated from each other. This began the long process of developing regional identities that would continue until the end of the pre-contact era, when European settlers arrived.
Yeah, exactly. So there's not much that we can say. So after this Clovis period, there's not a lot that we can say about these people's lives, because it was so far back in time. Material remains are so rare, and really all that survives are little bits of tools and animal carcasses. But there are some things that we can surmise from the evidence that we do have. So we can tell that these either Clovis, pre-Clovis, or post-Clovis peoples were very likely small in population. So across the eastern woodlands, they probably ranged around 25 to 100 people. And they moved quite often following the migrations of these animals that they really like to hunt, like the mastodon and the bison. Some things that we know about them is that their material remains of these Paleo period humans are also found conspicuously close to chert deposits. So chert was the main resource and material that they used for their stone tools. So even up to a contact, chert was used.
Yep.
It was the most hardy material that they could find for their tools.
Yep.
And also just something to note about pottery. The reason why these people didn't have pottery is really because pottery is only useful for sedentary people. So if you're in one spot, it makes sense to have this really brittle material for holding food.
Yeah, to quote, you're gonna laugh at me, but an influencer I follow, she does cooking videos. Okay. She'll say, love it, leave it alone. Pottery is kind of, it follows that, where it's like you put your thing in it, You love that it's in there and you leave it alone.
And
You
if
don't
you're
carry it with
and
you.
if you're living a really mobile lifestyle, it doesn't make sense to have a pot of
Yeah, it's
water
heavy.
or whatever. It's heavy, and then also you trip, you fall,
You're
there
screwed.
goes your lunch, you know?
So after a few hundred years, the material remains that archaeologists used to designate a Clovis site began to change and alter to fit regional variations and needs. This change occurred to the point that we can't continue to call these Paleo-era sites a part of the Clovis culture anymore.
As much as the Clovis culture existed, which, again, we will stress is just the way that they made their tools. We don't know if there was anything else about them that would unify them.
So they shared a tool identity, but not necessarily a cultural identity.
And they may have shared a cultural identity,
They may
but we
have.
don't know.
We don't know.
So we
we're
just need to
grouping
make
them-
sure you guys know that this is a construction that archaeologists have put together.
Yeah, this is an idea from archaeologists.
Yeah.
So after the Clovis period, there is not a specific designatory name for these specific groups of people, hence why we're calling them post-Clovis. Instead, for the purposes of this episode, we're going to refer to the Native Americans that lived in the Midwest during this time as Midwest Paleo-Americans. So it's hard for archaeologists to determine a cohesive material culture during this time because there is just so little evidence as to what the lives of these people looked like day to day. But we've got tools.
Exactly. So after several thousand years, the Earth began to warm significantly, creating more recognizable climates to us today and melting these huge ice sheets. So the Laurentide and the Cordilleran ice sheets, which comprised both halves of Canada, basically. So the Laurentide was the eastern half of Canada, Cordilleran was the western. But by 9000 BCE, these glaciers had retreated to their approximate current locations. So where we see glaciers today is basically where they were back then. Other thing that kind of signals the end of the Paleo period is something that we refer to as the Late Pleistocene extinctions. So with these changing climates, these animals that lived in North America were adapted for these really cold and frigid environments. So if you think about a woolly mammoth or a mastodon, those are big lumbering hills of wool. And they were well suited for really just glacial environments and temperatures. When it gets warmer, these animals are having a much harder time surviving. So that is causing some death and some population decrease. But also, there was the introduction to an extremely adaptable and smart new predator to the environment that go by the name of Homo sapiens that also likely contributed to the extinction of these animals. So just in summary, it was kind of a 1-2 punch of the warming climates and of the humans that were entering this ecosystem. And if you guys would like to learn more about the late Pleistocene extinctions, we actually recommend listening to episode 25 of this great podcast called the Common Descent podcast. I highly recommend it. They are really knowledgeable. And so if you guys want to know a little bit more about the paleontology of the Pleistocene, definitely go check that out. But this shift in climate, fauna, and the consequential changes that this had on the lifestyles and cultures of these early human settlers really marks the end of the Paleo period and then the beginning of the Archaic, which is the succeeding period. And that's the period that we'll be covering in the next episode. So just kind of in summary, humans all across America began to shift away from hunting these large megafaunal game because they went extinct to more diverse food sources, which would eventually lead them to having a more traditional hunter-gatherer lifestyle that we kind of imagine. So with that being said, that ends our main discussion for the Paleo period. So we're going to take a little break. And when we get back, Amanda is going to tell us a little bit about some fun Paleo-era sites.
Yes.
Archaeological sites.
Yes. So go enjoy your break.
Yes.
And we shall too.
Take a sip of your water.
And we'll see you when you get back. History isn't just in the books, it's in the soil, the stones, and the stories of your region. Join ARI's regional archaeological tours and explore hidden sites, historic landscapes, and the places where history happened. Led by real archaeologists filled with real discoveries. See the land like you've never seen it before. Check out our tour dates at exploreari.org. Hello. Welcome back.
Welcome back, everybody.
Yeah. Now we're going to talk about different notable paleo sites, specifically in the Midwest. So the first one we mentioned earlier on in the episode, which is the Paleo Crossing site, and that's in Medina County, Ohio, which is northern Ohio specifically. So excavations at the site have provided researchers with thousands of artifacts from what are believed to be the first human inhabitants of northern Ohio. The site was excavated by the Cleveland Museum from 1990 to 1993 after a local artifact collector in the area discovered some broken and then some whole spearheads. So I pulled some information from an article that the museum's magazine had released. Their previous curator of archaeology and project director, Dr. David Brose, stated that the spear points were made in a style known as Clovis and were some of the oldest certain examples of human activity in the New World. So, like we said, Clovis refers to the style of projectile points associated with the Paleo culture. And this site also had some features, some middens, and then 2 post holes. So, a post hole is basically just a hole that's dug into the ground that a post is then placed into. And that's how a lot of Native Americans would build any kind of structures that they needed. So, radiocarbon dating was performed on the charcoal found at the site, which led to the discovery that the site was occupied by humans as far back as 13,000 years ago.
So what we can learn about the Paleo Crossing site and the research that was done here is the tests on the chert that is found at the site led researchers to the conclusion that this chert came from the Ohio River Valley, specifically the Indiana portion of it, which helps support the idea that the expansion of the Clovis culture was really fast, basically. The journey from where the chert was sourced to where the site is around 125 kilometers, which is around 512 miles. But if they took a route that followed the rivers, then it may have been closer to about 1,000 kilometers, which is really long. This would have been the longest distances traveled by the people from this time, which they are already highly nomadic, but a journey of almost 1,000 kilometers would have been an extraordinarily long journey.
Right, especially for
people.
Just to get chert.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, to get a very specific resource is interesting.
So as we said a little bit earlier, the people who lived at this site are believed to be the first to have settled down in the lower Great Lakes region. So again, they are probably a part of the Clovis people. They may have been following herds of caribou due to being scarce in the region that they came from. Um, Unfortunately, not much of the site has been excavated, so there isn't many theories about what the camp would have looked like in terms of its layout and setup and stuff like that. But yeah, that's the Paleo Crossing site.
Yeah.
Pretty interesting. It's in our neck of the woods. We haven't really been up there. It's in northern Ohio.
It's on our list, though.
Yes.
Yes.
And maybe one day.
Maybe one day.
But I think we've got another site to check out.
Yes. So this was a site that I took a special interest in, mostly just because it reminds me of ARI and our mission and how we go about doing things. This site is called the Martin site. It's near the Missouri River Bluffs in St. Louis County, Missouri. The team of archaeologists is described as professionally led amateurs, and the site is described as one of the most important Clovis habitation sites in the Midwest. The findings from this site include over 38 Clovis tools and thousands of pieces of debitage. The first artifacts were found at the site in 1968. Martin's site is a farming field which is on the highest hill in the area for several miles. Julie Morrow contacted the project in 1995 wanting to study the surface finds for her dissertation. She then also had to contact the landowner to continue excavations before the land was to be turned into a housing development. The developer, which is the Nooning Tree Partnership, did allow Julie and Toby Morrow to continue excavations and showed support for the project. So excavations began mid-June with 20 units, which, do we remember what units are? Those are those 1 meter by 1 meter squares. All right, across a 1 acre grid. So the northwest portion of the grid is where the debitage and Clovis points were found, both in and then below the plow zone. Plow zone, again, just refers to the portion of land that is affected by agriculture. So it usually goes about 30 centimeters below the surface. After this concentrated excavation, like we said, it was 1 acre. This area of land was 80 plus acres. So the concentrated excavation was successful. Excavations were continued in this area instead of across the entire plot of land. Excavations after this decision were divided into the big block and then the small block. The difference is in the amount of units that were placed. So the big block had 96 units and then the small block had 12. Again, those are those 1 meter by 1 meter squares. There are many volunteers involved in this excavation, with their ages ranging from as young as 2 years old to as old as 80 years old. So the kind of rule of thumb we go by here at ARI is we can teach anybody from 2 years old to 102 years old. So I feel like the Martin site is a kindred spirit to
Yeah, it
us.
shows the power of involving the community and
Yes.
getting volunteers and stuff.
In just 1 month, 139 square meters were excavated, and some of the artifacts that were found that were really interesting was a variation of different points. You also had different types of scrapers and different types of blades. There was a total of 125 surface finds, and then 38 artifacts were found during excavations.
So what we can learn from this site, the Martin site, is that there were 2 different chert types which were found during the excavations. So the first is the Burlington chert, which is from southeast Iowa and central Illinois. The second is the Salem chert, which is associated with the Salem Formation in Illinois. And having both of these there at this location shows that there must have been some trade or movement happening to transport these materials. The location of this site was also considered really desirable prime real estate, if you will, for the time. The activities that took place here partially focused on hunting and processing meat. We also can tell that there was substantial effort that went into processing wood and other plant products. There was also just a clear diversity of activities, which just kind of goes to show you that people were living at this site and doing all kinds of activities that similar stuff we do today.
And it's showing that they're settling down a bit more.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a shift in culture.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, that wraps things up, doesn't it?
It does, and this is indeed, it couldn't be anything else but the outro for the episode. So thank you guys so much for listening today. Hopefully you guys learned something fun. If you guys want to talk with us directly, we've got some social media accounts. So I believe on Twitter, we are Midwestern Archaeology Pod. And then on Reddit, we are also Midwestern Archaeology Pod.
Yes. And you can also check out ARI's social medias as well. Those are all Explore ARI.
Please do. Yes. And we are going to be releasing the next episode sometime next month.
Yes.
The last Friday of the month. And it's going to be on what exactly?
So we're moving on to our next period, which is, we had the Paleo period this episode. So the next period is the Archaic period.
That is correct. Yep. And we're really excited.
Yes. And if you want to find us on Instagram, the Instagram handle is the_ARI_Inc. So come check us out. You'll see our lovely faces if you're curious.
We've got a lot of really fun stuff online. If you guys wanted to book any experiences with us, etc., etc.
Yep. And I'm going to point this out because today is Wednesday. We have a fun tradition. Every Wednesday, we post an artifact. And we have you guys sound off in the comments as to what you think it is.
So well, what's today's?
Today is a piece of ceramic. So actually, I think I pulled this piece out of the ground. Actually,
really?
I'm not sure. It looks similar to one
It's a really pretty
excavated this summer.
Is like the prettiest one I've ever seen.
Yeah. So
go check it out if you guys want to see what we're talking about.
Yep. Go check out our What Is It Wednesday posts.
Tune in next time, guys. Thank you.
Thanks for hanging. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.